All right, it's going to be busy this weekend in the garage for me, but one nice thing about doubling your garage capacity is you can work on multiple cars at one time, which is what we're going to do in this video. We've got two cars with coolant leaks from the same owners. They're actually regular customers of mine that I've done all their car stuff for. And they actually just recently realized that I have a YouTube channel. I thought they knew. So they asked that the cars be put on the YouTube channel. They wanted to see how this goes. And that's what we're going to do. So Rocky, Shelly, and their son Blake, greetings, surprise, I guess. This is their son Blake's car. This is a 1999 Honda Civic, I believe. And it has a coolant leak. So we're going to show how to diagnose that. Shelly's car is a 2002 Ford, it's a Explorer maybe, or an Escape. It's a Ford Escape, 2002 Ford Escape, that about maybe 2 months ago, before I moved, they had a coolant leak on that car, and I just simply did pressure tests like we're going to do on this Honda, and immediately found it was just leaking from the water pump. Shelly was there, she saw it herself, and so we replaced the water pump. After that, I moved. The car then developed another leak at the radiator, but I wasn't available at that time because of relocating. So they had some friend of theirs or whatever do the radiator, and they say they now are losing coolant still. So we'll see what's going on with that. Now here's the trick. I actually did look at that car and I couldn't find anything wrong. So we're going to start with the Honda because it's going to be easier, and then we'll go back to that one with the mysterious coolant leak or whatever's going on there. And then this car here we won't be showing. That's this car, something went wrong at a Jiffy Lube from what I understand, and it apparently didn't get oil, and there was some debate about it, which the owner did not seem to win. But this engine is seized up on this car, so I'm doing an engine swap on that one. But I'm just doing that over time because I can now let a car sit in my garage, which is kind of nice. So that's my weekend now. So we're going to start off with the Honda Civic and show you how to do a simple cooling system test. All right, where is it? There it is, right there. And yeah, this car does not have a prop rod. Shelly mentioned that. So we need to get something to prop it up. What I'm going to use, let's see if we can do this. This is a hood light bar, an LED hood light bar that I got for something like $200 on Amazon. That, quite honestly, serves way better as a prop rod, unfortunately. Okay, we can see we've got some coolant here. Now, of course, that's right on the top of the radiator by the coolant cap. I also see some below the radiator. One of the problems, though, again, is that our coolant fill reservoir and radiator cap are both right in that location. So you don't know, is this from filling the radiator because of the leak and having some spillover, or is this evidence of the leak itself? So here's what we do. My preferred way is to use this cooling system pressure kit with all these adapters, and basically we would just pressurize the cooling system using a pump and then force the coolant leak. Unfortunately, I do not have an adapter for a 99 Civic here. It would be one of these two. It's definitely not going to be this one. That one's way too tall. Some of these have adjustable gaskets on here. This particular one does not. This one does, though. You can actually add more or less little gaskets here. This one, unfortunately, is too big, so it's not going to make a seal on there. But what we would normally do is attach an adapter on there, and then you connect up your pump here, and you just connect the pump up to the adapter, pump up air into the system, pressurize it, and of course it will force the coolant out of wherever it's leaking. We don't have that option here, so we need to be a little more clever. The purpose of this clamp is to prevent the air from going back into the overflow tank. However, with what I'm going to do, we aren't going to need that. What we're going to do is a much more budget-friendly way by far than having that kit. I've got a rubber stopper here. Get billions of these from the laboratory all the time. We use them to stop up flasks and things like that. But what I've done is I've drilled a hole through it here, and we're going to put the stopper and plug up the hole just like that, where the radiator cap would go. And then I'm going to take some compressed air, and we just want to put a little bit of compressed air here. Don't put 90 pounds of PSI on your system. And this can kind of spray back at you a little bit, but we're going to push, and we can see where the leak is very easily, right at the top of the radiator there. Let's zoom in on that. Okay, if we look right along the top of the radiator here, you're going to see it's cracked. So just putting a little bit of compressed air to pressurize the system. It's leaking a little bit past my stopper, but there it is. You see right there? And that's our coolant leak. So this guy needs a radiator. All right, well, that was super easy. That's the way I would hope a coolant leak diagnostic would go. And what we're going to do, these Civics, man, the radiator replacements on these are so easy. You can do it in less than an hour for sure. So I'm not even going to charge them for it, just charge for the radiator itself, which I checked, and it's only like $80. So we're going to get Blake taken care of. I will replace the radiator, nothing to that. And then we'll get back to some brain work with the Ford Escape on this coolant leak that we cannot seem to find. And again, I did some tests to look for head gasket problems, and they were all negative. So we'll have to dig into that one. So let me get this car out of here with the new radiator. We'll bring in that Escape, and we'll do some diagnosis on that. All right, guys, it looks like we are going to get to go on a field trip to go visit this car with the coolant leak again. Now, before we go, I want to take a few minutes here to outline some of the history with this car that I have done, because I actually did look at this car and got some data from it that I want to kind of share with you guys and see if you come to the same conclusion I do about my suspicion on what is wrong with this vehicle. So, as a recap, the vehicle had been losing coolant, and they claimed there was a puddle of coolant under the vehicle every morning when they would go to start the car, and they frequently had to fill it with coolant. So this is about a month ago, I guess. I go out there, and as I mentioned, I used a stamp pressurizer to pressurize the cooling system, kind of similar to what we did in the first scene, but with an actual pump pressurizer. And right there before Shelly's eyes, we could see coolant just spraying out spectacularly from the water pump. No brainer, obviously, you've got a leaking water pump, right? So the thing is they bring the car over to my house for me to do the water pump. However, before I do any kind of repairs on a car that has had a coolant loss or any kind of a overheating or a suspicion of overheating, which would be with a coolant loss, the first thing I do, and granted I didn't show it in the first scene, but I didn't do it on camera, but the first thing I do is I do a relative compression test to make sure that there was no engine damage as a result of overheating. Obviously, I don't want to do the water pump replacement, turn the car back over to them, find out, well, yeah, they got a new water pump, but the car blew a head gasket from the coolant loss before. So now they're out the money for the water pump that I did when their engine is pretty much gone, right? So the first thing I did before I even bought the water pump, knowing that's what the problem is I did relative compression test, and it passed perfectly fine, flying colors. They also claimed there was no overheat, so really no indication of any engine problems, so I go ahead and I replace the water pump. Now, after replacing the water pump, everything's great, and they're happy, and then I have to go out of town for work for the next 2 or 3 weeks. I'm out of state. Well, about 2 weeks after I did the water pump repair while I'm out of state, they contacted me saying, hey, we've got coolant leaking again, but it's on the opposite side of the car from where it was leaking before with the water pump. I told them I'd be another week or two before I could even look at it. So they couldn't wait. They went over to a shop and they get the car looked at, and they find that a heater hose was leaking. So they told me heater hose is leaking. Oh, that's great. You know, good deal. Sorry I wasn't there for you. However, a week after they had the heater hose repaired, they said that they again were losing coolant, puddle of water, this time under the front of the vehicle in the center. They brought it back to that same shop, and they diagnosed that the radiator was leaking. So they fixed the radiator leak. And then a week later, they noticed it's losing coolant again. That's when they contacted me. I was back in town, and we are going to go look at the car now. Now, here's the thing. Given that history that I just fixed a water pump, the shop just fixed a leaking radiator hose or a heater hose, and the shop also just fixed a leaking radiator, all within like 3 weeks of each other, I've got a pretty good idea of what is wrong with this car, and I'm wondering if you guys are thinking the same thing I am. Okay, given the fact that we've had 3 leaks that occurred within a short period of time, what I believe is most likely the problem with this car is it has a blown head gasket. Why do I think that? Well, the reason is because I don't believe that it's just developing all these leaks all of a sudden. I think something is causing these leaks to happen. And one explanation for it would be if the car has a blown head gasket, of course, you've got combustion gases that enter into the cooling system and pressurize that cooling system far beyond its normal pressure. And that continued pressure is going to eventually cause something to fail and force leaks. I believe that's what was the problem with the water pump. It basically found that as the weakest link, blows out the gasket for the water pump. You fix that. The heater hose was the next weakest link, blows that out. Radiator, next weakest link. And I think that's what's happening, is that it's pressure building up in the cooling system from a blown head gasket. Now, the thing is I just mentioned at the start of this that the first thing I did was test to see if there is a head gasket failure before I even do the repair. So what I believe the explanation for that is I think we have another example, very, very rare, but we've seen this on the videos before, and I believe it's happened again. I believe the compression test lied. I believe when I did the relative compression test and it showed perfectly fine, that it lied and failed to detect the leak because it's either such a small leak that we just don't see the change in the compression on the test, or whatever other reason. Maybe it only happens when the engine's hot, something like that. But whatever the case is, I believe we're going to see a head gasket problem on this vehicle. So we want to keep that in mind while we're filming there, that I'm anticipating that we're going to inform them they've got major engine damage. So we want to be sensitive to their perspective of things. It won't be quite as interesting as it will be for us as we do the diagnosis. But that's what I believe we're going to find. So here's what we're going to do. The first thing when we get there, I'm going to do the relative compression test so that you guys can see what I saw and that the compression looks perfectly fine. If we have time, we will do a standard compression test. The only thing with it on this design, the intake manifold covers the rear half of the car. That's the reason I did the relative compression test, obviously. So we'll have to get that intake manifold off, and then we'll do a regular compression test with the gauge just to be scientific about it. There's really no reason to do it because the relative compression test is a sound test. It's going to show what the gauge does. But then what we're going to do is, I know Rocky has an air compressor. I'm going to bring my leak down kit, and then we're going to do a leak down test. And in my experience, while in a previous video I did show a leak down test can lie, if you keep the leak down on long enough, you should be able to detect the leak ultimately, and that's what we're going to try to do. So if all of those tests are negative, well, then what are our possibilities? We either have amazing coincidental leaks happening within a very short time period, which of course I don't buy, or we have something else besides a blown head gasket that is causing too much pressure that we're getting these leaks. We're going to I think we're going to find that the leak down test is going to prove that we've got a blown head gasket, but we're not going to see it in the compression test. That's what I believe. So let's go head out there and we'll do those tests and we'll see what happens. All right, guys, we are here. We got Rocky here topping off with some water in the cooling system, of course. And what we're going to do is, just like I said, run through some of the tests I did previously so you guys are caught up, and then we'll go ahead and do the leak down test. So Rocky, thanks for helping. Appreciate it very much. We we're going to do this. I'm going to go ahead and set up a pressure tester on it right now, just to show that there's no decay rate, which is another thing that I'll look for as a possible blown head gasket or loss of coolant thing. So I'm going to go ahead and hook that up right now. And we're kind of running out of daylight here a little bit, so I'm going to move with celerity here. And my adapter is causing me problems. Isn't this awesome? Technical difficulty with my adapter here, so I think we're going to forego this test. It worked last time, but keeps leaking out my adapter here. Yeah, that's not going to work. All right, well, the idea would have been to show that there's no decay, which is what I did last time on the pressure, and yet still losing coolant, so a little hard to explain. But what we're going to do is go right to relative compression test. All right, guys, really sorry about the glare. It is a bright, sunny day here, and I'm hoping this will show up. Let me do the best I can here. What we've got is we've got the fuel pump relay pulled. That's actually worse. And we've got an amp clamp around the starter cable. And we're going to do, there it is, relative compression test. Okay, Rocky, would you mind just going and cranking until I say stop? Just keep going. Keep going. Keep going. And stop. All right, right here we can see we've got what looks like essentially a good relative compression test. We've got a 6-cylinder engine here. We've got a little bit lower on this one here, a little bit lower on this one here, but again, the percentage difference is very, very, very minimal. Also, Rocky, if you can crank it one more time, guys, I want you to listen for the compression. Go ahead and crank it. Stop. You can hear there's no sound of compression loss on any one cylinder. What we're going to do now is do a regular compression test. As we can see, the challenge with this engine is that we've got the intake manifold covering the back spark plugs. These spark plugs here up front are really easy to reach. One of the strategies that I will often do is we'll just do the leak down or the compression test on just the front. If we find the problem there, then we don't really care about the back. Here's the trick. I already did that, and we didn't find anything wrong with the front ones. So I know I need to go in the back. I did that the last time I was here. So at this point, you guys are caught up pretty much where I am. The engine sounds good. It looks good on the relative compression test. Half of the engine passed. We got to test the back half of the engine. That's where we're at. So I'm going to go off camera and take this intake manifold off, and we're going to do a standard compression test just to look at the numbers, and then we're going to do a leak down test. Intake manifold removed so we can access the spark plug holes. So what we're going to do is the standard compression test just to validate what we saw on the relative. Again, we're looking at that relative compression test, and we're seeing there were a couple cylinders that did look a little bit lower on the amperage, but I've done this a million times, and I can tell you that that's within spec. You see that every time. They're never exactly the same. And we're going to show the numerical values that we're within 70% on each cylinder here. Rocky, if you wouldn't mind hopping in there, and let me zoom in on this gauge. Again, guys, sorry for the glares and everything. It's just really a difficult camera setting day. Nice day to film, but not so much for glare. Okay, go ahead and crank it. Stop. All right, see we got 180 there. 180 is going to be a good reading. All right, going to the next one. And Rocky, go ahead and crank it. All right, 180 again. Going over to the next one. Okay, go ahead, crank it. Stop. All right, we got higher on that one, 190. So about a 5% difference there, well within spec, so not even worried about that. All right, let's go over to the back now. Rocky, go ahead and crank it. Stop. About 185 on that one. All right, second to last one here. Go ahead and crank it. Stop. That one reads 190, a little over 190. As you can see, this is a really good compression test. So, again, that little bit of variance, not a big deal. We're seeing that also on the relative test. This is a good compression test, but I still believe we're going to see a head gasket on this. Go ahead and crank it. This is the final cylinder here. We're already past 180. You can go ahead and stop. It's about 185 or so on that. All right, that's standard compression test, relative compression test, superimpose each other. You would look at this car, say there is not a head gasket problem, but something is wrong here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to prove it. We're going to do a leak down test. And Rocky, if you want to get your air compressor set up. All right, guys, we finished the compression test. All the cylinders passed. So what we're going to do now is go to a leak down test. I'm just going to start off, it doesn't really matter, in this back corner, whatever cylinder number this is. It's going to be a little noisy with the compressor when we do that, but we'll focus in on this gauge. Rocky, what we need to do is connect up your air compressor onto this gauge here. And Rocky's got a pancake compressor, so it's going to be running the whole time, but that's all right. And then what I'm going to do is crank the engine over by hand until we get resistance. And Rocky, if you want to do me one more favor too, and let's top this coolant all the way to the neck here. Is that hanging on there? Oh, I hope we got the right adapters. That looks right? Yeah, that'll do it. Cool. And then I'm going to hook this up here. Okay, and we're just about there. So yeah, let's top off the coolant. What we're going to look for, we're not going to see leakage on this, I don't believe, but what we are going to see is the coolant bubbling up out of the reservoir. So I'm going to go ahead and crank this engine over to get some resistance. I know it has to be on the compression stroke when I connected it because I saw the engine move. So I know it's pushing the pistons down. Got it? Okay, so I may have to live down here, Rocky. You'll have to tell me if you see it bubbling or anything. Okay. All right, I want that gauge to be reading right around the yellow to the green. Okay.
It's in the yellow.
Okay, and nothing seems to be happening with the coolant.
No.
I don't hear any bubbling or anything. So guys, one trick with this, I've had this test lie on me too, because typically you'll see the results instantaneously. Let this go for at least a minute. And if after a minute you still don't see evidence of the leak, you're probably good to go. All right, should be moving the gauge now.
It's in the yellow.
All right. Not a lot of resistance on this one. I can actually move the cylinder to top dead center and have it hold. There's a lot of leakage there for some reason. You know what? We don't have any pressure. You need your pump on. That's why. Okay, thought we had something there. There it goes. So I'm looking at this gauge here and seeing that we just didn't have 90 psi of pressure. Looks like it's building up. It's super easy for me to turn that cylinder. Oh, thanks, Rocky. That's good. So obviously when I was able to move the cylinder without too much resistance, I thought, oh, we've got a lot of leak down. Obviously doesn't make sense because of the compression test result. But as you can see, we're building up our pressure. The air compressor is just a little pancake compressor, so it really needs to be running all the time. Got no bubbles coming up through the coolant. Really like to run this with at least 90 psi. Is your compressor capable of 90 psi, do you think? I'm not really familiar with those little ones. Oh, okay. Yeah, so Rocky's compressor is capable of up to 150, so we're going to let it cook for a little bit. Yeah, it's already up to about 80. I don't see anything here. And it's got really very, very minimal leak down. So I'm going to call this one negative. Let's go ahead and move to the other one. One of these is going to be a false negative, I'm very certain. Okay. What's it? It should be reading in the good. Past the green? Yeah, there's a lot of resistance on this one. Of course, the compressor is also pumping out probably past 90. Oh, by the way, we wanted to go like hold it. Can you set the regulator at about 90? Maybe about 100. Set the regulator about 100. But I'm going to say this one's negative too.
Yeah, it was that.
Ratchet slipped off. If you can look in the coolant reservoir, see if there's any evidence of any bubbles or anything through that neck of the coolant reservoir there. Yeah. Hang on. All right. Is there any evidence of any bubbles or nothing? I think we're good on that one. Let's go to the front. I'll be pissed off if it's in the front because that means I didn't have to do the intake manifold.
Yeah.
I did the compression test in the front last time I was here, but of course I didn't do the leak down test in the front last time I was here. So now that I think about it, if I'd have remembered that, we would have just done this in the front first, and if we find it, I wouldn't have had to do all that work.
Right.
Oh well. Makes for better drama for the video, maybe, if
Going through air.
yeah, going through every one of them.
Ridiculous.
All right. Get back under here. All right, there's compression stroke.
Going past the green, right?
Past the green?
Yeah, almost to the yellow, not into the final.
All right. Is there anything with the coolant going on?
Pretty stable.
Pretty stable? All right, I'm gonna hold this about a minute. Wow, it's pretty hard to hold it. Well, now I'm getting a little worried.
Eased up a little bit into the little.
Yeah, that's because my arm's getting tired holding it from here. All right. Nothing with the coolant.
No.
Nope. We're going to call that negative. I'm going to let it go. Well, guys, we're running out of cylinders here. If none of these do it, I don't know what to say. Maybe that the engine has to be hot, but I do believe, given the right conditions, we're going to find this. All right, we're on the 5th cylinder. Looking for our false negative here from the compression test. There's compression stroke right there. Oops. All right. Where's it showing?
Just a little bit into the final yellow.
A little bit into the yellow? And how's our coolant look?
Stable.
Nothing bubbling. Damn it. Well, we got one cylinder left to test. How's it looking?
Buried.
Buried, all right. And how's our coolant?
Coolant stable.
Yeah, all right, let me give this about a minute. All right, guys, well, we just went through all the cylinders. We weren't able to, I mean, look at where these are reading at. I mean, that's just no leak down at all. Well, some of them had a little more leak down, and we saw that with the compression test too. But we're not seeing that it's leaking into the cooling system because we're not getting our coolant bubbling or reacting. We've been through every cylinder. So now I'm kind of stuck. Every test we've done is completely negative. What I'm kind of tempted to do is revisit some of the cylinders that had the slightly lower compression and just let them cook for a minute and just really test those. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. We'll be right back, guys. All right, guys, this is not going nearly according to plan, obviously. So basically what we've done, we've gone through all the cylinders. We cannot get any evidence of a head gasket leak with the leak down test. So what I've done is I've written down our numbers from our compression tests here. And what we're going to do is go for the lowest one. That's only 178. That's a really good compression reading. Again, negative on the compression, negative on the leak down test, but it is the lowest value. So what I'm going to do is set the leak down tester up on that. We're just going to let it cook for like 5 minutes and see if we get any evidence, again, of a very small leak that's just really hard to detect. But that's the best we're going to be able to do given the amount of daylight we have left. So we'll keep an eye on it and we'll see what happens. All right, guys, a little anticlimactic end to this video. Hopefully we will be able to continue this, but for the last hour, probably the last hour, we've gone through the leak down test, every cylinder again. Mind you, if you guys follow the channel, you know the way I do a leak down test. I'm measuring with the piston at the bottom of the compression stroke. So I'm getting the whole cylinder measured, not just the cylinder head gasket area. So it's every cylinder we retested again, tried to be scientific about it, and wrote down my leak down and compression numbers. We targeted the cylinder that had the lowest compression and the most leak down. We let that thing cook for 5 full minutes. It's still cooking right now, and I can tell you there's not been one bubble coming out of the water. By all means, it certainly looks like this car does not have a head gasket failure. We got a new water pump in it. We've got a new radiator in it. Got new hoses, right, Rocky? New hoses. I know the water pump works. I know it's circulating because you can feel the temperature difference between the hoses on the upper and lower radiator. You can feel the rush of water if you pinch the hose. So I know there's circulation. Rocky, does the heat work? Do you know?
Haven't tried it.
Haven't tried it. Be interesting to see if the heat works. Well, you know what? It does. It does, because when I did the water pump, one of the first things I do is I make sure the heat works to make sure that we've got full circulation. So the heat works, so we know we're getting circulation. I cannot find any evidence of a head gasket leak. So they say that the car loses coolant and then starts running up the temperature. But yeah, we've got no coolant leaks, nothing. So the best that we'll be able to do is hopefully get this car into the garage and take a closer look at it. But as far as out here in the field, I was expecting we were going to find a head gasket problem. We have failed to do so. So, all right, that's the best we got. We'll have to continue this. We'll talk to you later, guys. Thanks, Rocky. Okay, I am beat here. I'm not even sure what to say, but we're going to have to start from square one, and I'm just going to have to see the symptoms myself, make sure if the car's overheating when there's coolant in it, things like that. But I just want to review a lot of the things that I did off camera that weren't shown because I either did them previously on my first visit or while I was messing around off camera and we were doing some of the leak down testing. But basically we've got two possibilities we're looking at here. Of course, my hypothesis going in was that we have a head gasket leak or some kind of compromised combustion chamber where we're getting combustion into the cooling system. That was certainly what I thought would be causing this problem. The problem is we're negative on everything. Compression test was negative. Leak down test was negative. I also, of course, looked to see if there was any evidence of water in the oil, muddy oil, oil level high, things like that. That was negative. The last time I was out there, I forgot. I was suspecting, of course, possibility of a head gasket, so I brought my chemical tester. I can tell you the chemical test was negative. One thing I forgot to do, those of you guys who have followed the channel for a while, the infamous Sizzle Test, Cedric's Sizzle Test, probably about the most reliable test for a head gasket there is without using tools. Basically just taking a little bit of the oil, dropping it on the hot exhaust manifold or on a heated piece of aluminum or something, and if it sizzles, there's water in the oil, but if it just smokes, there's no water in the oil. Did not do that, and if we get the car back, I'll definitely do that and see. The other thing that the Sizzle test could be good for is not necessarily a head gasket, but if you've got an intake manifold gasket where a coolant jacket is leaking, that also would be detectable here because you've got water in the oil. Shame I didn't think to do that. We should have done that. The other possibility, and of course, I have to go on the data here, even though I really was suspecting a head gasket problem, I have to go with the data and just be objective about it. I cannot go on the assumption that this car has a head gasket problem. All the evidence is contrary to that, so I got to change my mode of thinking and start looking at some other variables. One of them is that the car does have an actual coolant leak, an external coolant leak. The problem with that is the pressure decay test that I did. I tried to do that today, but I was having some problem with my stamp tool. I'm not sure what was wrong there, but I did do it the last time I was out there, and I can tell you there was no pressure decay after even 5 minutes. So I couldn't find any evidence of external leak. Obviously, when I did it when the water pump was bad, it was blatantly obvious, but again, also keep in mind, after I do the water pump, I want to test it, right? So I did a pressure decay test after replacing the water pump, and of course, there was no issue at all. So that was negative. And of course, visual inspection for any evidence of leaks, I saw absolutely nothing. The car is bone dry underneath, and there's no evidence of puddles of coolant or anything. So I am not quite sure what to make of this, but I think what I'm going to have to do is see the symptoms myself and get the car in here. But just wanted to share that with you. Sorry for leaving you guys hanging on this one, but hopefully we get another part to it pretty soon. Thanks for watching. Hope you found this entertaining. We'll see you next time.